First story. My new husband promised to gift my son a car on his 18th birthday when he really wasn't. But my delusional son believed and made a fool of himself. Then humiliated my husband at his party. So I grounded him for being ungrateful. And he left my house and is now living happily without me. And I regret how my life turned out. I 46F have been married to my husband, Rick 52M, for a little over 4 years now. Rick came into my life after I'd spent years raising my son Ethan 18M on my own following a bitter divorce from his father. Rick lost his own family in a tragic accident before we met, and I think that changed something in him. He developed this dark, dry sense of humor that not everyone gets, but it's how he copes. I've always admired that about him, how he can still laugh after everything he's been through. Ethan never really bonded with Rick. He tolerated him, sure, but I always sensed that little wall. No outright disrespect, just distance. I think a lot of it is teenage resentment. Rick has tried. He helped with homework, took him to doctor's appointments, and even taught him how to drive. But Ethan always treated him like some temporary guest in the house, never a real parent. When Ethan was 17, Rick told him he'd get him a car for his 18th birthday. Not just in passing, he said it multiple times. I know some people will jump in and say, that's a huge promise, but Rick was clear. If Ethan kept his grades up and behaved, he'd buy him a car. Rick even had him browse online listings. For months, Ethan was sending him links to models he liked. Rick asked him what color he wanted, what upgrades. They'd sit for hours looking at rims, leather seats, and aftermarket audio systems. Rick joked that it was his second project car. But Ethan believed it, and why wouldn't he? I'll admit, I got excited too. I thought it was a huge gesture. Ethan was a good kid, mostly. A little mouthy, a bit lazy around the house, but nothing awful. And Rick seemed genuinely happy doing this for him. He even opened a separate savings account, or so he told me. I never asked to see it. I trusted him. But about 2 weeks before Ethan's birthday, Rick came to me and said, I have a better idea. I asked what he meant, and he smiled. You know how Ethan's been acting like this car is the second coming of Christ. Let's give him a little dose of perspective. I rolled my eyes and laughed. What are you planning? Rick told me he was going to buy a toy car and gift wrap it. A fake out. He said he'd still get him a real car, but maybe not on the day of the party. Maybe the day after. Just to see how Ethan reacted. I told him that was cruel, and he said, it's a prank. He'll laugh about it in a year. I didn't press. I should have, maybe. But part of me got it. Rick wasn't a malicious man. He just liked to poke the bear, as he called it. The day of the party came. We hosted it in our backyard. Friends, some of Rick's coworkers, a few of Ethan's friends from school, and even his ex showed up. There was music, barbecue, and balloons. Rick gave a little speech about how proud he was of Ethan, how he'd grown into a man, and how happy he was to be part of his life. Then he handed Ethan a small gift-wrapped box. I knew what was inside. A Matchbox sports car, shiny red, probably $10. Ethan looked confused but hopeful. He peeled off the wrapping paper with everyone watching. Inside was the toy car, sitting on a bed of tissue paper. Ethan stared at it for a few seconds. Rick grinned and said, there's your car, but fully paid off, 0 emissions, doesn't even need gas. A few people laughed. Nervously. One guy let out a loud guffaw and clapped Rick on the back. Ethan didn't laugh. His face turned red. He asked, are you serious? Rick just kept grinning and said, gotcha, didn't I? Ethan looked around. His friends were dead silent. His ex had her arms crossed. Then he turned to me and asked, so there's no car? This was it. I didn't say anything. Honestly, I froze. I didn't expect it to go that badly. He walked out of the backyard, past the guests, and through the front door and slammed it behind him. The party ended awkwardly. A few guests tried to make light of it, saying Ethan was probably just embarrassed. But people started filtering out. Within 20 minutes, we were alone. Rick wasn't as smug anymore. He looked genuinely hurt. I was trying to joke with him, he said. Is it so wrong to mess with the kid a little? I said maybe he went too far. But Rick insisted Ethan had become entitled and needed to be taken down a peg. He said he was going to ground him and take away his phone. But I reminded him that Ethan was 18. Now we couldn't really make him do anything. Later that evening, I got a call from my father. Ethan had gone straight to my parents' house and said he was done with us. That we humiliated him. That Rick was a liar who manipulated him. I tried to call Ethan. No answer. I texted him. You're being dramatic. Come home. We'll talk about this. He didn't respond. Rick, meanwhile, was furious. He said Ethan disrespected him in front of guests and should apologize. He said he spent months planning this whole thing, and now Ethan was acting like a victim. He ranted about how soft kids are these days, how they expect everything handed to them. And honestly, I agreed with him. We did spend months talking about this car, but I never heard Ethan say thank you. Not once. Not even when Rick was asking about the custom upgrades. It was always, get this, I want that. Make sure it's red. Like we were some dealership on demand. Still, part of me wonders if we went too far. But Ethan's behavior. Storming off, ignoring calls, acting like he's some wounded orphan. It's immature. He's 18. He's not a child anymore. He could have handled this like an adult. Rick tried to call him too. Left voicemails. Said he didn't mean to upset him, but still doubled down he wasn't going to coddle an adult over a joke. He asked if we should go pick him up from my parents. I told him no. Ethan made his choice. He left. Let him sit with it. 2 days passed. No word. I called again, nothing. Rick was fuming. He said, if he's going to live under this roof, he's not going to act like this. But again, Ethan was legally an adult now. We couldn't force him to come home. Rick said he felt betrayed. He tried to build something with Ethan. And now Ethan was treating him like garbage over one prank. On the 3rd day, I drove to my parents' house to talk face to face. My mother barely let me through the door. Ethan didn't come downstairs. She told me he didn't want to see me. I asked why they were encouraging this behavior. She said, you let that man humiliate your son in front of his friends. And now you want to act like he's the problem. I tried to explain it wasn't humiliation, it was a joke. A bit of misdirection. My dad interrupted and said, you dangled a promise in front of him for months, asking him what mods he wanted, what color, what engine. And then you laughed in his face. You let your husband mock him. I asked him if that was worth storming out, ignoring calls, and acting like a victim. He said, it is when the people doing it were supposed to care about him. I left. I didn't tell Rick everything they said, just that Ethan wasn't ready to talk. Rick said maybe we should cut him off for a while. No money, no car, no phone payments. Let him grow up on his own terms if he thinks we're so awful. I said we'd wait a few more days. A week passed. Still nothing. Meanwhile, I started hearing from people who were at the party. Some thought it was funny. Others admitted it was awkward. One of Ethan's friends messaged me saying he thought the prank was messed up, and Ethan looked genuinely crushed. Another guest said Rick seemed to enjoy watching him squirm. I brushed it off. Teenagers get dramatic over everything. Rick told me he was done apologizing. He said Ethan embarrassed him, not the other way around. I was trying to give him something to laugh about later in life. You think I had money to drop on a car? I was saving a little, yeah. But I've also been covering this house, the bills, and your kids' food for 4 years. That stung. But it was true. We never promised Ethan a brand new car. We said a car. He was the one talking about leather seats and custom paint like he was buying a Ferrari. We let him dream. That's not a crime. Rick told me that if Ethan had laughed it off and stuck around, he would have talked to a buddy who runs a used car lot and maybe worked something out. But now, why should I give anything to someone who acts like a brat and runs away the second things don't go his way? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how entitled Ethan sounded. Acting like he was owed a car. As if we didn't raise him, feed him, give him everything. My parents never bought me a car. I worked, saved, and bought my own rust bucket when I was 19. Rick didn't have anyone. He built his life from scratch. Maybe this was good for Ethan. A wake-up call. But still, I kept wondering if this was all necessary. It was a prank. Just a joke. Rick has a warped sense of humor, sure, but he didn't do it to destroy him. He thought they'd laugh about it. If Ethan felt hurt, fine, he's allowed to be upset. But storming out, ignoring us, refusing to speak, acting like we betrayed him, that doesn't hurt. That's tantrum behavior. Rick keeps asking what we're going to do if he just doesn't come back. I said we wait. Eventually, he'll need something. Money. Documents. College help. And when that day comes, we'll have that conversation. But I'm still angry. And I'm still not apologizing. He made us look like monsters. Turned my parents against me. Ghosted us over a plastic car. And all while Rick really tried to make him feel like family. Ethan couldn't see past his own ego for 5 minutes to recognize that. I keep going over everything in my head and wondering if I missed something. If we pushed too hard. If there was a warning sign I ignored. But the truth is, I think Rick was right. We didn't raise Ethan to be this fragile. He's not 5. He's not some poor orphan kid desperate for affection. He's a grown man. He got embarrassed because his stepdad didn't hand him a car on a silver platter. I won't reward that by groveling. So here we are. Ada? Comments. Comment 1. YTA. You're so far up Rick's arse, you can probably hear his thoughts. Your son didn't overreact. He got set up. You and Rick built up this fake promise for months. You didn't just let him dream, you actively participated in creating the illusion. Asking for colors, mods, or even engine types. That's not a prank. That's emotional manipulation. And the part where Rick says, I didn't really have the money anyway, so what the hell was the plan? Just screw with an 18-year-old on his birthday in front of his friends because he was entitled. Also, Rick wanted to ground a legal adult. That's some controlling, insecure energy. He's pissed because the kid didn't take his humiliation like a joke, and instead called it for what it was. You're mad because Ethan left instead of sitting there and pretending it was funny. He removed himself from people who disrespected him. That's called setting boundaries. You didn't lose your son because of one prank. You lost him because when he needed a parent to stand up for him, you picked your husband's ego over your kid's dignity. Comment 2. Info. What's Rick's track record with Ethan really like? Because this feels less like a one-off prank and more like years of low-key resentment boiling over. Rick clearly doesn't respect Ethan. His whole attitude after the party screams that calling him entitled, wanting to punish him, cutting him off. That's not prank remorse. That's power tripping. The prank was a setup to make Ethan look small, not some bonding joke. And you're sitting here acting like Ethan ghosted you over a plastic toy. No, he cut contact because the two adults in his life collectively conspired to play with his expectations, and then acted like he was wrong for having feelings. Also, it's wild how Rick says he was saving for a car and then turns around and says, I didn't have the money. So which is it? Either he lied, or he never planned to buy it. And if you never questioned the savings account, that's on you too. This wasn't a joke. This was a test. And Ethan failed it by not rolling over and laughing. That's why Rick is mad. Comment 3. I'm not going to call you an arsey hole because I think you're too deep in your own head to see how badly you effed this up. But I will say this. You're treating your son like a misbehaving employee. You talk about him being mouthy and lazy, like he's been this unbearable burden. And now that he didn't perform appropriately during your husband's little joke, he's immature and fragile. No, he's just done. Done with being tolerated instead of loved. Done with being told a man who's only been around for 4 years deserves his loyalty, while that same man mocks him for fun. And yes, he's 18, so he doesn't have to come home. Doesn't have to speak to people who make him feel small. The prank wasn't the issue, it was the last straw. And your lack of empathy sealed it. If you keep treating this like he's the one who blew it, don't be surprised if this estrangement becomes permanent. Update. A lot has happened since my original post, and frankly, most of it has just made things more disappointing and frustrating on our end. I appreciate the comments, even the harsh ones, even though many seemed hellbent on painting me and my husband as cartoon villains, instead of people trying to navigate a genuinely complicated family situation. After Ethan stormed out on his birthday, Rick and I gave him space for a few days. We assumed wrongly that he'd come to his senses and realized the whole situation wasn't the tragedy he was making it out to be. Rick even said, let's pack up some of his things and drop them at your parents' house. See how long the silent treatment lasts when he's not getting his stuff. It was a bluff. Rick honestly thought Ethan would freak out, realize he went too far, and come crawling back. He didn't. Instead, Ethan showed up unannounced 4 days later. Didn't text, didn't knock, just used his old key and walked in. I was at the kitchen table. Rick was in the garage. Ethan didn't say a word. He went straight to his room, pulled his passport, grabbed a file with his social security card and school docs, and walked right back out. I called after him, but he didn't even pause. Rick came in from the garage, just in time to see the front door shut. He didn't scream or throw anything. That was almost worse. The silence felt surgical, cold, deliberate. It stung. I think Rick expected some kind of angry outburst. Instead, Ethan treated us like strangers, like we were beneath acknowledgement. Rick didn't say anything at first, but that night he broke down. He told me he felt like he'd lost his family all over again. He said he was trying to connect with Ethan in the only way he knew how, through jokes, teasing, and messing around. That was how his dad treated him before the accident. That's how he bonded with the cousins he lost. Rick wasn't trying to hurt Ethan. He was trying to reach him. He doesn't always get humor right. I know that. And I don't agree with every prank or snarky joke he makes. But the birthday prank wasn't some evil scheme. It was tone deaf at worst. And Ethan's response, cutting us off completely, wasn't fair or proportional. What made things worse was what happened next. My parents got involved. More involved than they already were. They called and told me they were considering giving Ethan a used car. Some 29 Toyota that used to belong to my dad. They said it wasn't fancy, but it still ran fine and would help him move forward. I lost it. That's not just a gift, it's a slap in the face to Rick. After everything, they're going to swoop in and reward Ethan for walking out. And immediately after the incident, no less. It's like they're validating the tantrum and rubbing it in Rick's face. I told them absolutely not. That at the very least, they could wait a month or two, let things settle. My dad said, "You don't get to tell us what to do for our grandson." My mom was more blunt. "You've already failed him. We're just trying to limit the damage." And just like that, the divide deepened. They told me not to contact Ethan unless he reaches out. That Rick isn't welcome in their home anymore. That I should be ashamed for enabling a man who thinks cruelty is comedy. They've always been overprotective of Ethan. But this is the first time they've openly turned against me. It hurt, but I won't back down. If they give Ethan that car now, all they're teaching him is that the loudest person wins. That if you pout hard enough, people will line up to give you what you want. Rick and I talked it over, and we're not budging. We've decided not to replace Ethan's phone plan next billing cycle. We're not forwarding him any mail. We're not begging him to talk. We've done enough chasing. Some people in our lives, friends, co-workers, have started pulling back too. A few of Rick's buddies from work haven't stopped by since the party. One of the wives told me that she felt uncomfortable watching the prank happen in real time. I told her, honestly, that the discomfort was probably her own projection. The world has gone soft. One joke and suddenly we're public enemies. It's ridiculous. And before anyone jumps down my throat again, yes, I get that Ethan was hurt. I get that maybe he felt blindsided. But you don't go no contact over one mistake. Especially when that mistake didn't come from malice. Rick isn't abusive. He's not cruel. He's a man who lost everyone before he was 20. And humor is how he survives. He thought Ethan could handle it. And if he was wrong, fine, but Ethan's complete shutdown and refusal to talk is not mature. It's petty. We've also decided to start therapy, not to fix things with Ethan, that's up to him now, but to work through the emotional fallout of being vilified and rejected after trying so hard to build this family. Rick especially needs to talk to someone. Losing Ethan, after trying to bond with him for 4 years, reopened some serious wounds. I'm done chasing my son. He's made his choice. He wants distance. Fine. But this narrative that we're monsters, and he's a victim, it's not real. It's curated. Convenient. If he wants to grow up, he needs to understand that the world doesn't hand out apologies every time your feelings get bruised. Comments. Comment 1. Jesus Christ, OP. You're still missing the point. This wasn't one mistake. It was months of build-up, customizations, mod talk, budgeting, encouragement, and then public humiliation. That wasn't a prank. That was gaslighting for sport. And now you're trying to justify it by saying Rick had childhood trauma. Look, I'm sorry he lost his family young, but using that to excuse bullying behavior is not how coping mechanisms work. Therapy isn't optional, it's overdue. Also, the way you reacted to the grandparents wanting to give Ethan a car. You literally said it would humiliate Rick. Why? Because someone else dared to give your son the thing Rick lied about for months. You and Rick keep talking about respect, but neither of you showed any to Ethan. What you really want is obedience. And when Ethan didn't roll over, you called it immaturity. Why Tia then? Why Tia now? Own it. Comment 2. I think the most telling part of your update is how Ethan came back, got his documents, and didn't say a damn word. That wasn't petty. That was peaceful detachment. That's what it looks like when someone's done playing emotional gymnastics. Your husband played with that boy's expectations like it was a game show. Then he called it humor. I don't know how Rick defines bonding, but if my stepdad ever pulled that SHT at my graduation party, I'd walk too. The kicker. You say Rick never really had the money. So he spent months letting Ethan fantasize about a car that never existed, and you co-signed it. Then you dropped his phone plan. As if the punishment will teach him a lesson. All that's teaching him is that his family's love is conditional. You say he chose to leave, but you guys handed him the map. Comment 3. From your update, it's clear Ethan never stood a chance. The way you describe him, it's always dismissive. Mouthy, fragile, entitled. Meanwhile, Rick's trauma gets a soft cushion and a permission slip to be an arse. Let me explain something. Childhood trauma doesn't make someone interesting. It doesn't excuse harming others. It makes someone responsible for getting help before they hurt the people around them. And your logic is so warped. Giving Ethan a used car is somehow a personal attack on Rick. What planet are you on? Your kid got lied to and embarrassed. Your parents stepped up in a way you and Rick refused to. Honestly, you didn't lose your son because of a prank. You lost him because when he finally needed you to act like a mother, you sided with a man who saw him as a punchline. Update. It's been a long time since I last posted. But after everything that's happened and not happened, I thought an update was fair. It's been over a year since Ethan walked out on us after his birthday. Not once has he reached out. No phone call, no message, not even a forwarded piece of mail. For a while, I convinced myself he just needed space and time. That maybe, eventually, the silence would wear off, and we'd have one of those awkward, but healing conversations you see in movies. It never came. After a few months of pretending everything was normal, Rick and I started therapy. Not because we thought we did anything wrong, but because the weight of rejection started eating at Rick. He'd never say it out loud, but I know it hit him harder than he let on. He already lost his biological family in one night. Ethan's exit felt like another death just stretched out over time. Therapy was supposed to help with that. We tried 2 different therapists. The first one kept circling back to empathy and repairing ruptures. Rick hated her. Said she was trying to guilt him into apologizing for something he still believes wasn't malicious. The second therapist was more practical, focused on boundaries, grief, and what to do when someone decides they're done with you. That one helped a little. I've said this before, but I still don't think what we did was cruel. We didn't set out to hurt Ethan. Rick was trying to connect in the only language he knows, humor rooted in survival. And I was trying to support my husband while balancing an 18-year-old who, frankly, always acted like the world owed him something. But none of that mattered in the end. Because once Ethan decided we were the villains, that was it. No conversation. No middle ground. Just radio silence. We didn't even know where he was living for a while. Rumors floated around an old friend's couch. Maybe staying with that ex from the party. Possibly in a shared college apartment. I didn't stalk him. I figured if he wanted us to know, he'd tell us. The first time we saw him in nearly a year was at my mother's funeral this past spring. He came with my father. Stood in the back, head down the entire time. Didn't approach us. Didn't say a single word. Not hello, not I'm sorry for your loss. Nothing. Rick didn't even realize Ethan was there until halfway through the service. I kept glancing back, waiting for eye contact that never came. At the gravesite, he stood apart from the family. It was like we were strangers. It was surreal. My mother loved that boy like her own child. And yet, even in grief, he wouldn't acknowledge us. Rick left the burial early. He said he wasn't going to beg for respect in front of a crowd. I stayed until the end. I kept hoping maybe Ethan would pull me aside. Just one word. Something. But he left right after the last shovel of dirt hit the ground. The next week, I sent him a card. Just a simple birthday note with a check. Not a big one. Enough to cover a textbook, maybe gas for a few weeks. It wasn't a bribe. I just didn't want him to think we'd given up. The card came back in the mail, unopened. Return to sender was scrawled in red Sharpie across the front. I recognized the handwriting. Rick was livid. He tore up the envelope and said, "That's it. I'm done." He blocked Ethan's number, email, and social media. Removed every photo from his office. Packed up the last of Ethan's things and put them in storage. As far as Rick's concerned, he has no stepson. I told him that felt final. He said it was final. But I haven't stopped thinking about it. I keep wondering what Ethan thinks we are now. Are we villains in his mind? Are we just shadows of something he wants to forget? Does he tell people we traumatized him over a plastic car? Or has he moved on so completely that we don't even register anymore? I've thought about reaching out anonymously. Not to manipulate him or trick him into talking, just to say, I still care. Even if you hate me, I care. I haven't done it yet. Part of me knows that if Rick ever found out, he'd see it as betrayal. But I also know Ethan was mine long before Rick entered the picture. That doesn't go away. I feel lost. I feel frustration. I feel disrespected. But I don't feel like we wronged him so badly that it justified total abandonment. We weren't abusive. We didn't scream or insult or harm him. We made a bad call on his birthday. That's it. A single moment, blown into a narrative I don't recognize. I'm not here to beg Reddit for forgiveness. I'm not here for sympathy either. I just wanted to show what happens after the silence. When the dust settles and nobody comes back. When the phone doesn't ring. When the holidays pass and that extra plate never gets used. I thought time would fix it. That Ethan would grow up and realize we weren't monsters, just flawed people who made a misstep. But time hasn't softened anything. If anything, it's hardened all of us. Maybe one day he'll reach out. Maybe he won't. But for now, the silence speaks louder than anything he could say. Edit. Yes, my parents gave Ethan the old Toyota a few weeks after the fallout. I asked them to delay it out of respect for Rick. They didn't. Ethan took it and never acknowledged us. Not a thank you. Nothing. They rewarded him for cutting us off, plain and simple. Comments. Comment 1. There's something chilling about how casually you describe Rick wiping Ethan from his life. Blocked him. Took his photos down. He packed up his things like he was just a tenant who broke a lease. And you watched it happen and called it final, like it's a goddamn business transaction. I'm not even Ethan, and that update hit like a gut punch. The part that broke me. The unopened envelope. You say it wasn't a bribe, just proof you hadn't given up. But then Rick rips it in half, and you act like he's the wounded one. You haven't been rejected. You've been held accountable. And instead of facing that, you and Rick doubled down, got therapy that fit your version of the story, and labeled Ethan's silence as immaturity. Meanwhile, that kid grieved your mother alone. You stood a few feet away, and he still couldn't trust you with a single word. That's not stubbornness. That's trauma. You both need to ask yourselves, what was so broken in your house that silence felt safer than speaking? Comment 2. Honestly. Your update reads like someone writing a eulogy for a relationship they murdered, but still want credit for grieving. You keep saying you feel lost. But loss implies something slipped away. What happened here was pushed. Ethan didn't ghost you. He escaped you. You made his birthday a stage. Rick played the villain. You played the enabler. And when your audience didn't laugh, you decided the kid couldn't take a joke. That's not just tone deaf, it's cruel. And Rick. That man wasn't looking for a son. He wanted a mirror. Someone to validate his trauma with obedience and gratitude. Ethan gave him neither. So now he's blocked. Deleted. Scrubbed from existence. You want people to understand your side. But you've spent every post refusing to understand his. The update isn't about healing. It's about justifying silence with moral superiority. Let me make it simple. He's not coming back. Not because he's spiteful. But because you made unconditional love feel like a conditional transaction. Second story. I love my dad so much. But I wish I had called him dad, at least once in my life. Now I want to, but he's no longer here. I'm 18. I'm not gay, but I wanted to confess something without getting homophobic comments. And I don't expect anyone to read all this. I was a foster kid since I was a toddler. When I was 9, I met my new half-brother and sister. They were babies, and they were fostered out to 2 men. I went over a couple of times, and one time one of them, Dad 1, asked me what my deal was. I was a defensive kid, and I said, "What's it got to do with you?" He said, "No wonder you don't have a home." I remember wanting to hit him, but he put his arms around me and kept me there until I stopped. I remember him saying, "I think you're a good kid in a bad spot." I called him a bad word, and he said he liked me even more. The social worker and my temporary foster parents had a chat with me not long after. Apparently, the 2 men were going to foster me. They showed me around my new home, and then Dad 1 took me out to play. And I remember him telling me that I'm a handful, but that this will always be my home. I never had a home and just thought it was another false promise. I was used to false promises never get too comfortable. Not long after my placement, my bio father kicked up a fuss at 2 men minding his son. There was one day I was home alone with Dad 1, and my father came in and grabbed me by the arm to take me away. Dad 1 caught my father by his neck. I still remember how angry he was. He said something like, "You come near my boy again, and I'll make sure you regret it." I never told him, but him calling me his boy gave me hope that it might be different this time. I never told anyone what Dad did that day either. My father never troubled us again. I was a prick in school. I got in trouble a lot. Fighting and stuff. Dad too struggled with me, but Dad 1 would always come into the headmaster's office. He'd be disappointed, but he was never angry. Sometimes he'd be interested in how the fight went. There were a few times the fight began because another boy was mocking my parents with the F word, and those times he'd treat me to McDonald's or something lol. I did calm down as my life stabilized. Dad 1 and I used to camp. He'd take me to football games. We'd play PlayStation. He'd take me to work sometimes and often to the pub. I was his favorite, whereas I think Dad 2's favorite was my siblings, understandably. I can remember both Dad 1 and Dad 2 being really excited when I had my first date. Dad 1 took me shopping. Dad 2 styled my hair, and then Dad 1 unstyled my hair. The three of us stayed up late after my first date, and I spilt the tea. I used Dad 1 and Dad 2 here, but I never called either of them Dad. I didn't like the word my hang-up. In March, Dad 1 died unexpectedly. He was my rock. I miss him, and I feel kind of alone again. I don't really have the same bond with Dad 2 or my own half-siblings. The thing I regret most, however, is never calling him my dad because of some stupid hang-up. He always made it a point to call me his boy, yet I never called him Dad. I know it would have meant a lot to him if I had. The guilt of not doing so eats me up most days since his death. I know this is probably the wrong sub for this, but I just wanted to put it somewhere, and I didn't want homophobic comments. I miss my dad. The one who gave me a home, loved me and wanted me. He was the best dad a messed up kid could have. Consensus. Everybody is ugly crying. Comments by OP. I know he's struggling big time. I'm not sure whether saying it will help or hurt him. He wasn't just his husband. They were best friends. I never heard them have one fight. I kind of tried to hide my own issues around him because of his struggle and instead help with my siblings. They weren't just husbands. They were inseparable. He is struggling a lot, and I kind of felt like I needed to be the tough one for him and my siblings, but maybe not. I usually just cry in my room. Yesterday was the anniversary of them taking me in, so everything feels a little more raw. Yeah, it took me a while, but I did say I loved him, perhaps not as often as I should have. I said thank you a lot. On my 18th birthday, I thanked them both for what they did for me before we cheers ed my first legal drink. I did a little speech. Dad 2 cried lol. Dad 1 put his arm around my neck and told me I'm a right softie. He and I were never the best at saying our feelings, though. I hope there is an afterlife too, and he is reading it from up there. You're right. I probably became closer to the rest of my family. They are going through the same as me after all. Hopefully he is up there looking on. After his death, I found out he had a similar upbringing, although he was a little older. It's weird, but I could always sense it. He always understood. The thing that kind of holds me together is he always called me his boy. So I assume he knew it, even if I didn't say it. Dad 2 is kind of struggling, and I didn't want to burden him. I tried being the tough one. I do love Dad 2 too. It's just a different bond. Knew what it was like to have guardians who didn't care enough to do anything with me, which made me love Dad 1 and Dad 2 even more. Despite my regret, Dad 1 has given me many great memories. Strangely, I think I've become a better brother since his death, probably to help Dad 2 more than any other reason. I think I will share it with him. I don't want him to think I don't care either. And I do love him too. I'm as grateful to him for taking me in and loving me. I should learn to cherish the one I still have. Update. I don't know if anyone remembers me. I was a foster kid, and 2 gay men took me in. Dad 1 died suddenly, and I regretted never calling him Dad. It was probably rude not to tell you guys sooner after all the replies you gave me. I did tell Dad 2 a few weeks after I posted about my regrets. It really upset him, but in a good way, I think. He said he was glad I told him, as he was really worried about how I was coping. He told me Dad 1 was the driver behind them taking me in. He saw himself in me, apparently. Dad 2 told me about Dad 1's upbringing. I knew bits, but not a lot. He said our social worker told them I was a different case from my half-siblings, which he knew. They were warned not to expect any affection from me, including being called Dad. He also told me how his parents came over when I was 12 or 13. His parents told them it was rude I didn't call them Dad. Apparently Dad 1 told them if they say that again, especially in front of me, they will not be allowed in the house again. Dad 2 told me Dad 1 never cared about being called Dad by me because he never expected it. He said I went beyond Dad 1's expectations by giving him a hug now and then, and by being his best bud. He said Dad 1, and I couldn't be apart for a couple of hours without a bunch of texts being swapped, which was kind of true. I read over them sometimes. It was often stupid stuff. I'm at uni now, so we don't live together as much, but Dad 2 and I have been far closer than we ever have been. We do a lot more stuff together. Saying Dad is still a bit of a hang-up for me, but I've begun calling him Pops. I still miss Dad 1. I still cry. I'd have been nothing without him, and I'm everything because of him. I've mostly made peace with never calling him some variation of Dad. I can't change what I didn't say. If there is an afterlife, it'll be the first thing I'll say to him as we sit down to a game of PlayStation. Anyway, I've brought down the mood enough. But thanks for the encouragement. I'm very glad I made the original post. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.